Welcome back to the JumpifyLabs Podcast, the show for founders who want growth without the guesswork. Here we talk about the systems driving predictable growth, and today's guest helps founders design their business for privacy, protection, and long-term control. David Greenberg works with businesses that want to protect their assets, operate more privately, and also build systems that actually work in the real world. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Jay. It's a real pleasure. I appreciate you inviting me on.
I appreciate you for coming on and being here. Let's kick things off. So how did you first get into the world of trust and asset protection?
Yeah, great question. This all came about fairly recently. So I would say initial seeds for this came out maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But then I really started getting deep into it, I would say like 3 years ago. And in the beginning, it was mostly study. But then when I saw the practicality of it, I started to think about ways to put it into practice.
And what were you seeing in the market that you found that most people were missing?
Well, I think everybody's heard of a trust, but I think like me and most people, there was really nothing on offer that really just clarified the value and power of trusts and how they are widely applicable and not just for the ultra rich, not just, fringe cases, but actually can have a wide standing applicability. So I was pleasantly surprised by that. And I just realized that, because of that, there is potentially a huge market for business owners and families who value privacy, value asset protection, who want to be able to put something practical in place. I think that's where the real opportunity is.
Mm-hmm. And David, can you talk about why someone should consider getting a trust early on? Because a lot of times it's just, okay, I'll get the LLC. People think is enough protection for myself. But when should people start considering getting the next level up, which is getting a trust?
Sure. I think this is why we focus a lot in education, Jay. So once people see the power of a private trust, especially a non-statutory trust, they see how the distinction between that and an LLC, and the fact that you can run a business in many cases, maybe not in all cases, but in most cases you can run it under a trust, and you see what kind of asset protections. You almost ask yourself the other question, the reverse question, like, why wouldn't I want to establish that as a best practice? And sooner rather than later probably also has to do with the fact that it's going to take time to put everything in place, to fully learn everything, to make sure you have great trustees in place. So you might as well start taking action sooner, because you don't want to, just like any other protection, you don't want to cobble something together at the last minute when it's already too late.
And what's a big misconception people have about trust in general?
Oh, I think there's several of them. One is you have to hire an attorney to create a trust. Another one is that a trust is only for the ultra rich. In other words, it's going to be cost prohibitive to either create or run a trust. And there's probably a few others, that it just generates trust fund babies, these spoiled brats who go around who have access to accounts. And that's kind of, the best that you can get out of it. And also that it's not accessible. It's not widely accessible as a legal framework.
Yeah. So if most people are thinking, okay, having a trust is something that's way outside of the reality for myself, can you talk a little bit about why it's not? I mean, outside of like not needing an attorney or it not being reserved for the ultra rich, like what would that process even look like? Because I'm thinking just from my own personal experience, when I first started a business, I just bought the LLC and I got the bank account and I was off to the races. But you're introducing the trust, which I'll admit, it was like that for me too. Like it's something that, I'm probably not going to make enough money in this business to justify doing that. So to me, it is like, for me, the first time I'm hearing that it is something that you don't need an attorney for. So can you explain, and you have this education first approach, explain what the benefit would be to having a trust in the first place? And then maybe like start onto the process of how you actually get that started.
Okay. Well, the three main benefits of a trust are asset protection, privacy, meaning privacy when conducting commercial activity, and limited liability. And anyone who's operated in business at a certain level or dealt with assets is probably going to be at least somewhat familiar with these concepts. So asset protection means basically when you or a business gets sued and there's a claim, when the assets are protected, they can't be used to settle the claim. Someone can't come along and seize those assets in order to pay off an obligation. So that's what asset protection does. It separates the ownership from the use or the benefit of the assets. You've probably heard the phrase, own nothing, control everything. So that's basically the principle in trust. And then privacy comes in because the trust that we help people create are non-statutory. They're not registered, they're not recorded, and very few people will know that they even exist. I mean, obviously, if the trust has a bank account, the bank is going to know about it, but some trusts don't even have a bank account. So literally a handful of people will even know they exist. And then certainly the commercial activity, because they're unincorporated, there's no annual report that has to be filed. There's no disclosures. Everything is private. And then limited liability just means, again, that whoever's operating in commerce is not personally liable as long as they're not acting in bad faith, doing things willfully in a wrong way. They're not going to be personally liable for the commercial activity. Now, limited liability companies promise that as well, but trusts go way beyond.
Okay, what's an example of that? Because what I'm hearing is that an LLC will fall a little bit short as far as privacy and control. So what's an example of how an LLC may not be giving you what you're expecting? Like, what's a story about how it falls short?
Yeah, the number one issue with any LLC is it's a registered entity. So it's a state-created entity. Even though it's your business, it's really not. It's the state's. The state co-owns every LLC because you can only create an LLC with the state, with the Secretary of State. What that means downstream is that the state, meaning, let's say, I'm in Texas. So if I create an LLC here in Texas, that means the state of Texas has an automatic security interest in my LLC, even though it's a private company. And that means if it's ever in the court, the state can just easily, practically reach their hand in and grab any assets owned by that LLC to satisfy any claim that ends up in court, just because the state co-owns the LLC and for no other reason. But with private trusts, that can't happen because private trusts are not co-owned, they're not incorporated, they're not owned by the state, and they're not even registered by the state. However, they are recognized in law as being able to conduct business activity. There's a long legal precedence recognizing that business trust can be used as a type of business, an unincorporated business. It's just not as well known, but it's perfectly valid in law. And there's even state laws in every state that deal with private trusts.
Okay, so what I'm also hearing that trust is clearly very important for protection and all the other things you mentioned. What's something that people maybe not needing that they think they do when it comes to this whole space of liability protection, asset protection, privacy, etc.? Like, for example, one thing that comes to mind is a lot of people say, like, oh, do I need to trademark my business? Maybe not super early, but what's your experience?
Yeah, that's a good question. Trademarking is a commercial process, so you're essentially registering whatever that property is again. So it's kind of that same idea. So if you were trying to operate more privately, you wouldn't register that, as long as you were. But then if someone else came and used the same name, the question is, how would you enforce that? And you wouldn't really have a commercial way to do that. You would have to resolve that privately. I don't know. I'm not saying that these commercial remedies don't have a place, but I'm not sure I understand your question entirely. Like, I think the case for setting up trust for almost every business, at least on the back end, is so compelling. It's hard for me to come up with a scenario where someone couldn't benefit from having a trust.
Yeah. Okay. That makes a lot of sense, David. But I want to talk about as well the type of work you're actually doing with the people you're working with. How are you helping them to avoid the feeling of overwhelmed by maybe what's something that feels a little bit complex?
Sure, that's a great question. So I'm all about education. This is a passion of mine, especially since I started creating video content. I even started creating video content before I got into all of this. So I think it's been about 9 years now that I've been uploading videos to YouTube. Of course, in the beginning, it wasn't much to speak of, but I was always kind of getting out there and sharing ideas. I enjoy doing that. So as an organization, we're all about education. I love to talk about this stuff, as you can tell. I love to teach about it. We do a lot of workshops. We create a lot of video content. We do have memberships where people can come and learn at their own pace. So kind of like a self-study. And then of course, for people who are really busy, we do obviously have services where we can kind of work with our clients, hold their hand through the whole process of setting everything up in terms of high touch. But for people who just want to start learning it, there's some great starting points. You can jump right in and start learning today.
David, I really like your approach. And we talked about it before, how for you, one of your core values is transparency, and you giving away your information for free on YouTube. I want to talk a little bit about that strategy. What have you seen having content that's out there for free for people to consume? What has that done for your business?
Yeah, it's relationship building. It's when I meet people in consultations, they often say to me, David, I loved your videos. I watched all your videos. I hear this all the time. I watched all your videos. I like how you present yourself. You resonated more with me than, someone else, things like that. So I get a lot of positive feedback. So, and, I enjoy doing it already. So I'm happy to do it. But when I also hear all that feedback from people, again, mostly people on consultations or in our study sessions, it just tells me that this is valuable. It has real value for people and for new people all the time. So I'm constantly meeting new people. So from a business perspective, and I actually tell people when I meet other business owners, even in different industries, I'm always saying, hey, you should start a YouTube channel. I'm very, very keen on that. I think it's a great strategy. It's a long play. It's not a short-term play, but it's something that can really pay off and create a great relationship with your audience so that when you jump on a call with someone, it's like they've already met you because they've watched a lot of your videos.
That's exactly the reason why we started Jumpify Labs as well. So people can see not just the people we bring on like yourself, but also see my face because I am essentially driving the company. It just reaffirms to me that this route is a good route. We all know the importance of content, but we're also like a little bit timid by the idea of putting ourselves out there. For someone that's listening that says, okay, I've been toying with that idea, I want to do it. What's some advice you have for them that could maybe nudge them and get out of that overthinking space?
Yeah, that's a tough one because from my experience, you have to find motivation and enthusiasm within you. It's not really something that someone can give you. I think someone could be a good example. And when I'm working with someone one-on-one or talking to people, I'm often encouraging them. But I think ultimately you just have to go for it. I think people sometimes complicate things. So when I started doing videos, I of course didn't have an editor. I didn't have fancy intros to my videos, none of that stuff. It was just raw video footage with maybe a very basic level of editing. So just like anything, you just want to get started. Don't worry about the edits. Most phones today have pretty decent cameras built into them. So just use what you got to start.
Yeah, and in your video process, what systems are you refining now through your video creation process or even just for your business moving forward? You said you have a membership as well. You're clearly developing still. You're still building these cool things out. What's next?
Well, that's a great question. So in terms of editing process, like now we have an editor. He's a part-time editor who edits all the content. So I used to edit all the videos myself. I enjoyed it, but it's just not a good use of my time. So we've graduated to the level now where I have an editor. So there's kind of an evolution. That's why I say just, it's good to start where you're at and then just you will grow into the next level. So as far as how we operate, so we have a couple of different layers. We have the free public facing content, mainly on YouTube and elsewhere, LinkedIn as well. Then we have memberships, which are usually very low cost, low subscriptions, and give you access to live instruction in addition to courses. And then we have the services. I would say what's coming next is a couple of things. I'm going to do a live podcast interview in Nashville later this month with one of our other educators. And I'm going in March to San Diego for a big event, apparently a big networking event, which is supposed to be people like very high level executives and leaders, even former presidents of countries and stuff. So it's supposed to be very high level. So that's what's coming up for me in the near term.
Wow. That's very exciting. What's the event in San Diego? Is it a event that people can buy tickets to, or is it an invite only event?
You have to be invited only. It's called The Secret Knock, but you do have to be invited. And I was pleased to receive an invitation kind of by surprise. I wasn't really expecting it.
Oh, well, congratulations. You're going to go to my city. I love San Diego. I'm not in San Diego right now, especially if you're going in March. Hopefully it's starting to warm up by then. All right. So David, who is maybe not a good fit to start building their trust right away? Realistically, if someone's just maybe toying with the idea of starting a business and they haven't quite sold their first clients yet or sold their first products yet, what's an example of someone who's maybe too early?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I guess if you're at that early stage of your business where you're just trying to figure out like some kind of consistent cash flow, consistent revenue, and you don't really have something that's working consistently, it's probably better to focus on that for now. I mean, that's what I would do. And then come back to this because this is always going to be available. So if you need to take that first, 3, 6, 9 months, a year to really dial in your business model, go ahead and do that now. But I wouldn't put it too far off into the future, but you got to prioritize. So if creating a steady income or business revenue is top priority, I would just focus on that first.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. And David, if somebody's interested in this space, this should be honestly now at this point, everyone, if not everyone that's listening to this episode, where should they start to get into your brain? What's your YouTube channel? Where's the best way for them to reach out?
Awesome. Yeah, we've made things super simple. We've embraced the link in bio model. So if you just surf to thefreedom.studio, so thefreedom.studio, and that's basically a link in bio, and it has everything we have to offer, everything from free workshops, all our social media, our main website, our memberships, consultation services. I mean, really a little bit of everything. And I would just start at the top, just subscribe to our YouTube and just take it from there. Probably subscribing to the YouTube channel if someone enjoys both short and long form content is going to be a great starting point.
Amazing. David, thank you so much for sharing. If you're listening to this, David gives away a ton of free resources, as you just mentioned. The website is thefreedom.studio. So without any real commitment, you can still get the value that's all lodged up inside David's brain. He's got a ton of it clearly. And we've honestly just barely grazed the surface. The intention of this conversation is really just to talk about the importance of asset protection, privacy, and how a trust can help you do that. So if you want some more, David is very generous with his time, his knowledge. He gives it away for free. And of course, you can level up to his membership. And if you're super busy, let him and his team do the work. David, any last words?
Well, Jay, I just want to thank you again for having me on. I've really enjoyed this. Even though it's a brief conversation, I feel like we touched on some stuff that's really important, and I was able to share a little bit, and hopefully this resonates. I'm sure this will give value to your audience. So thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you, David. All right. So if you're listening and you want to reach out to David, be sure to check out his links. And if you do want to hear more from other leaders pushing the envelope for different processes of business, be sure to tune in to Jumpify Labs for more. My name is Jay. Thanks so much. Talk again soon.